The winter passed, and the bad weather started to improve. The boundless snow transformed into gurgling streams, bringing life to the endless wilderness that stretches out beyond the town of Tobolsk. Pascha with its beauty was coming, and every evening all the churches, both grand and simple, filled with faithful people who came to worship the Lord, who suffered and arose, the sweet teacher of love and forgiveness. Especially that year, since the atrocious name of Wolfman Tom of the Ural Mountains had been nearly forgotten, Pascha was about to be celebrated with greater splendor, magnificence, and freedom as well. For this reason, when the heavy bells resounded sweetly and joyfully, declaring that Christ is risen, everyone poured out into the streets carrying their colorfully decorated paschal candles and wearing their best clothes. On this radiant day of Pascha, well-dressed aristocrats and clean peasants met in the streets and wholeheartedly embraced one another, and full of joy greeted each other with the paschal greeting, Christos voskrese, voistino voskrese. Christ is risen, truly he is risen. They celebrated Pascha all the day long, with everyone united in brotherly love. The nostalgic balalaikas played sweetly, while the girls hit their tambourines, and the young men danced their traditional Cossack dances. That evening, the main town square filled with colorfully dressed people who danced in the old-fashioned way to celebrate Pascha, which is for all Orthodox Christians the chosen and holy day, the first of the Sabbath, the queen and lady of all feast. The old men with their plaited Cossack hats and brilliant knickers were leaning on their carved staffs as they joyfully watched the great celebration of Christianity. Boys and girls tirelessly danced and treated each other with extravagant gifts. All the shouting, rejoicing, singing, and hugging gave a special meaning to the celebration of the day. Once night began to fall, the townsfolk, tired but completely satisfied, slowly started to set off their homes. They bid each other farewell and wished each other, next year it will be even better. Amongst the last to depart was the merchant of Tobolsk, the middle-aged and good-hearted Alexei Sailovsky, with his thin, noble wife Tatiana. Full of joy, with his face all red from vodka, he bid farewell to the mayor. Mr. Mayor Christian Mikhailovich, accept my warm congratulations for organizing today's festivities. They were a great success. If you only knew how much this great festival relaxed me after all the trips I made across Siberia to take care of my mercantile business. Christos voskrese. He and his wife warmly bid the mayor farewell and then boarded their sleigh that was covered with rich furs and pulled by two little horses. The sleigh's silver bells rang so sweetly and softly that they spread a pleasant musical tune across the quiet of that spring evening. Mr. Sailovsky softly hit the little horses, and then with a smile turned to his wife, who was joyfully leaning her head against his shoulder and quietly singing a pleasant native song. And he said to her, Tatiana Sailovsky, how beautiful this Paschal evening is. Its peaceful charm proves that the dirty boots of Wolfman Tom have vanished from this area. Tatiana's large, expressive eyes opened and closed gracefully as she looked at Alexei tenderly, while her lips spoke as if reciting a formal, rhythmic poem. Alexei Ivanovich Sailovsky, the name of that terrifying Wolfman Tom, has already become a myth that we use only to frighten our children when they don't want to obey us. And to prove her point, she again started singing another Paschal song, even more lively and joyfully. Soon afterwards, Alexei Sailovsky's voice interrupted her. My lady, we have arrived already without even realizing how the time passed. Then he courteously offered his hand to his wife to help her step down from the sleigh. Before them rose the grand old Sailovsky mansion, which was only a mile outside of town. It had 3 stories, 2 large balconies, and an endless garden with enormous trees. Silence reigned everywhere. No one was in sight, which surprised Tatiana so much that she said, "That's strange." She got off the sleigh with a troubled look and fearfully looked straight ahead at the front door, which was left half open. Tatiana thought to herself, without saying anything, "Our two good and faithful servants, Dmitri and Kirill, didn't come out to welcome us as usual. Not only that, but they couldn't even hear the happy, lively voice of their only child's nanny, the kind Domna Mikhailovich, who always ran to greet them every time they returned and would pleasantly say, 'Welcome back, my precious couple.' The deadly silence that reigned everywhere heightened their indistinct fear and alarm. So Alexei started shouting loudly with his heavy, imposing voice, 'Domna! Dmitri! Kirill!' But the echo of his voice made a strange, hair-raising sensation in both of them. Despite Mr. Sailovsky's shouts, no one came out of the half-open door. Involuntarily, they let off a sigh from the depths of their souls as they rushed to the entrance of their house without even realizing how they went inside. What they saw filled them with such terror that Tatiana collapsed on a small chair that was nearby. Even Alexei Salovsky nearly stopped breathing. Their two servants were lying near each other in a pool of blood, with their heads smashed open. With trembling feet, Alexei proceeded as if drawn by a magnet to Domna's room, where he found her on her bed, with a look of horror on her face, and her head disgustingly deformed as she slept the eternal sleep of death. Oh, poor Domna, you were so nice. Following this sight of indescribable misery, Tatiana grabbed her head with both of her trembling hands and started calling to her only son in despair, as if out of her wits. My child, Mikhail, Mikhail, where are you, my son?" Her heart-wrenching screams echoed fiercely between the high, speechless walls of their mansion. Mikhail was a very blond child, with lively, green, strange little eyes. He wore a long, light blue nightgown. He looked more like an angel that had broken loose from the heavenly assembly that had come to bring some joyful tidings to this world. Upon hearing the troubled voice of his mother, he woke up and sat up in his little bed. Sweetly he replied, "Here I am, my dear mummy." And slothfully rubbing his eyes, he asked, "What were you shouting so loud for?" As soon as she saw him, crazy with joy, she threw herself into his arms and kissed him insatiably, crying out in tears, "My child, my sweet child, my darling, are you all right?" She hugged him so tightly that the little one let out an "Ouf!" of pain. An innocent smile that spread across his rosy lips revealed his deep satisfaction for his mother's great love. He nonchalantly answered her, "Yes, my golden mother, I am fine. I fell back to sleep right after a huge man with a long beard burst into my room. He was holding up in the air his little toy." Beside his bed, he showed her that fearsome weapon known to Russians as a kistin. A kistin was a useful weapon for the local hunters. It was an iron ball tied to a strong leather strap. Whoever was struck in the head with this fearsome weapon instantly met an untimely death. This deadly weapon was literally drenched in the blood of the 3 murdered servants of Alexei Sailovsky. Tatiana gave a terrified look to her husband and said, with a muffled voice, "Alexei, alas, Wolfman Tom is still alive and is somewhere nearby." Little Mikhail took the terrified paleness off the face of his mother by turning her head with his warm little hands and tenderly saying to her, "You know what, Mummy? I was just sleeping here in my bed when I heard that man with a beard and wild hair kick open my door. I woke up, and as soon as I saw him raise his toy, I took out from under my pillow that beautiful egg that I painted for so long yesterday, And I smiled, and I gave it to him, and I told him, Mister, Christos Voskrese. He looked at me right in the eyes for a long time, and then he gradually lowered his hand holding his toy. He looked at my egg for a long time as if enchanted, and then, as if something burned in his hand, he left his toy on my bed. Then he stretched out his hand and took my egg. He looked at it curiously for quite some time, and then he raised his eyes and looked at me. His entire face transformed, and then he smiled and said to me, Voistinu Voskrese. And then I saw, little Mikhail continued, 2 tears shining in his eyes, and when I asked him why he was crying, he held the egg tied up against his chest and ran to the door and disappeared. Mikhail smiled with satisfaction about telling his story, and then with childish innocence went running to see what was happening. For in the meantime, the news of the new disaster that had struck the neighborhood spread like lightning, and many fearful people had come running to find out more details about the latest crime of Wolfman Tom. We're done for, some people said in despair, as they realized that Wolfman Tom was continuing to murder people with the same vengeful wrath.